Coming live from the Tivoli Met Radio studio here on Auraria campus, this is All Sports with Gerardo. Thank you for listening to All Sports through Met Radio on mymetmedia.com, live every Thursday from 3:30 to 5 p.m. This is your host, Gerardo, and all I talk is sports. On the show today, I'm going to talk about NFL football, Major League Baseball, NBA basketball, NHL hockey, and college football. So before I start the show, I hope you all had a great week. To start off with Major League Baseball, Mike Trout won the 2019 Hank Aaron Award for the American League, and Christian Yelich won the 2019 Hank Aaron Award for the National League. So congrats to Mike Trout and Christian Yelich on winning this award. Now we're going to have to wait and see if Mike Trout and Christian Yelich win any other awards in their leagues. But looking at individual awards in the American and National League, we're going to have to wait and see when this award ceremony comes up in the next few weeks after the 2019 season ends. And once the World Series comes to an end and we have a World Series champion, but it's going to be interesting to see what individual players win what awards in the American League and in the National League. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what player wins MVP in the American and National League, what player wins Rookie of the Year in the American and National League, what pitcher is a Cy Young winner in the American and National League. Also, what manager will be Manager of the Year in the American and National League. But it's also going to be interesting to see what players win the Gold Glove Award at their position in the American and National League. And also, what players win the Silver Slugger Award in the American and National League. So I can't wait for this awards ceremony to come up in the next few weeks. Also, Nolan Arenado and Trevor Story have been nominated for the Gold Glove Award at their position, and they've also been finalists. So we're going to have to wait and see if Nolan Arenado and Trevor Story win the Gold Glove Award at their position. There's no doubt that Nolan Arenado will win the Gold Glove at third base, and we're going to have to wait and see if Trevor Story wins the Gold Glove at shortstop, but he definitely has a strong case. The Cubs are hiring David Ross to be their next manager. The Phillies are hiring Joe Girardi to be the next manager. So it's going to be interesting to see how David Ross manages the Cubs, since he was a former player for the Cubs, and he was a part of the 2016 World Series team that won the World Series against the Indians, and he was a huge part as to why the Cubs were able to win the World Series in 2016. Also, it's going to be interesting to see how Joe Girardi manages Bryce Harper and the Phillies. It's a talented roster, and now that they have the right manager, they should be able to get back to the postseason this season. So we're going to have to wait and see if David Ross can get the Cubs back to the postseason, and if Joe Girardi can get the Phillies back to the postseason. It's going to be interesting to see how David Ross manages the Cubs, since he was a former player for the Cubs. But it's going to be interesting to see how Joe Girardi manages the Phillies, since he was the former manager of the Yankees. After the Yankees lost to the Astros in the American League Championship Series, this will be the first decade the Yankees will not appear in the World Series since the 1910s. So the last time the Yankees won the World Series was back in 2009. And in the last 10 years, the Yankees have missed the playoffs a few times, but they've also made it into the postseason in the last 10 years a couple times. But the times they've made it into the postseason, they have lost in the division series or in the championship series. Now, the last 2 times they've made it to the championship series, both times they have lost to the Astros. So hopefully in the next decade, the Yankees can get back to their winning ways. And it looks like they're getting back to that format. The Yankees have a talented roster, and they have some great players on their roster. In their starting lineup, they have great starting pitchers. They have great relievers in the bullpen. So now, all the Yankees need to do in the next few years is have a great regular season, win a lot of games, get into the postseason, advance far into the postseason, but they need to appear in the World Series and win the World Series. We're going to have to wait and see if the Yankees can get to the World Series and win the World Series in the next decade. But so far in the last few seasons, and with the roster they have now, looks like they're going to be able to accomplish that next season or going into the future. The Astros are World Series bound. They ended up beating the Yankees in the American League Championship Series. The Astros will be playing in their second World Series in the last 3 years. The Astros won the World Series in 2017, and they're trying to win their second World Series title in the last 3 years. Jose Altuve was named American League Championship Series MVP. So looking at the current Major League Baseball postseason bracket, in the National League Championship Series, the Nationals were able to sweep the Cardinals. In the American League Championship Series, the Astros were able to win the series 4-2. So looking at the World Series is underway now. And currently, the Nationals have a 2-0 lead over the Astros. And believe it or not, the Astros were able to win both games down in Houston. So now that this series switches to Washington, D.C., the Nationals want to continue their winning ways and win in Washington, D.C. at Nationals Park. And all they got to do is win 2 more games and they're World Series champions. The Nationals definitely have the advantage since they have won the first 2 games of the World Series. And they were able to win them on the road down in Houston. So looking at the World Series schedule, the first 2 games were in Houston. The next 3 games are in Washington, D.C. And if this series has to continue on, the final 2 games will be in Houston. So even if the Nationals lose 1 game to the Astros, they still have a chance at winning the World Series in Washington, D.C. All they need to do is win it in 5 games. They're World Series champions, and they have won the World Series in Washington, D.C. Now, it's going to be a great story if the Astros win the World Series or if the Nationals win the World Series, but especially if the Nationals win the World Series. The Nationals want to win the World Series since they have made it all the way to the World Series. And the luck has been on their side this season compared to the last 6 seasons. In the last 6 seasons since 2012, when Bryce Harper was on the team, the luck has not been on the Nationals' side. They have made it into the postseason. Now, whether they've gone as a wild card team like they have this season, or they've won the National League East, the luck has not been on their side, and they've lost in games that they've needed to win, or they've lost in the winner-take-all game. It doesn't matter if it's the wild card game, the National League Division Series, or the National League Championship Series. The luck has not been on their side, and they have lost in the postseason in the last 6 seasons. But this season, they turned that around. The Nationals were able to take down the Brewers in Washington, D.C. in that wild card game. The Nationals took the Dodgers, which was one of the best teams in the National League, all the way to Game 5 at Dodger Stadium, and the Nationals were able to take down the Dodgers at Dodger Stadium in the National League Division Series. And the Nationals were able to sweep the Cardinals in the National League Championship Series and take down the Cardinals. Now that the Nationals were a wild card team in the postseason this year, they have made it all the way to the World Series, and they currently have a 2-0 lead over the Astros. Now don't count out the Astros. They're one of the best teams in the American League and in Major League Baseball. But the Nationals have a 2-0 lead over the Astros in this year's World Series. And all the Nationals need to do is win 2 more games, but especially win those 2 games in Washington, D.C., and they will be your 2019 World Series champions. Now, if the Nationals can win this year's World Series, they're definitely going to make history. They've already made history throughout the regular season and in the postseason. But if they can win the World Series, this will be the icing on the cake. The Nationals have already made history by appearing in their first World Series in franchise history. And the Nationals have only been around since 2005. But if the Nationals can win this year's World Series, they're just going to keep making history in 2019. So we're going to have to wait and see if the Nationals can take down the Astros and win this year's World Series. But so far, it's looking great for the Nationals, especially in the postseason and now in the World Series. And it doesn't matter if the Nationals have played on the road or in Washington, D.C. They've especially been better on the road, but they've been great in Washington, D.C. So it doesn't matter where they play, even the games they have lost. When they've needed to win games, they're winning games, whether it's on the road or in Washington, D.C. Now, the World Series is between the Astros and the Nationals. So now that I gave you a preview of the Astros and the Nationals in the World Series, now I'm going to talk about the Astros and the Nationals individually as a team. Now, looking at the Astros and the Nationals, there's a reason why they're both in this year's World Series. The Astros are representing the American League, and the Nationals are representing the National League. Now, both teams have some of the best starting pitchers. It doesn't get any better than that. They got Garrett Cole, Justin Verlander, and Zach Greinke. Now the Nationals got Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg, and Patrick Corbin. Both teams have great starting pitchers. They both have great relievers in their bullpen. But they also have great starting lineups. And it just doesn't get any better than that. Now looking at the Astros starting lineup, they got Alex Bregman, they got Carlos Correa, they got Jose Altuve, George Springer, Michael Brantley Jr., and the rest of the starting lineup's great. Now looking at the Nationals, they got Ryan Zimmerman, they got Juan Soto, and the rest of their starting lineup's great. But looking at the Astros, the reason why they're in this year's World Series is because of their starting lineup, but especially Jose Altuve. After doing that 2-run walk-off home run against the Yankees in Game 6 of the American League Championship Series, that's the reason why the Astros are in this year's World Series. And they've had to battle throughout the postseason against the Rays and the Yankees. Both teams challenged them and took them all the way. But the Astros showed that they were the better team, and that's why they're in the World Series. But now that they're in the World Series, they need to show why they're a great team and why they're the better team. So Jose Altuve has been playing great. Carlos Correa, George Springer. But we need to see more from Alex Bregman and the rest of the Astros starting lineup. Now looking at the Nationals, Howie Kendrick and Ryan Zimmerman are the main reasons as to why the Nationals are in this year's World Series. Ryan Zimmerman, Howie Kendrick, and even Juan Soto, but especially their starting pitchers, which includes Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg, Patrick Corbin. That's the reason why the Nationals are in this year's World Series. They were able to battle and take the Dodgers all the way. They were able to take down the Dodgers in the National League Division Series. They were able to sweep the Cardinals, take down the Cardinals in the National League Championship Series. And now, all they need to do is take down the Astros, and they're World Series champions. And so far, they've been playing some great baseball. Now that the World Series is underway, and the first 2 games of the World Series were in Houston, the next 3 games will be in Washington, D.C. If this World Series goes all the way to Game 7, then Game 6 and Game 7 will be down in Houston. In Game 1 of the World Series, Juan Soto hit a home run in his World Series debut, and he became the second youngest player to hit a home run in the World Series at 20 years old. Juan Soto isn't even 21 years old yet. And he turns 21 years old on Friday, just before Game 3 of the World Series in Washington, D.C. Juan Soto joined Miguel Cabrera as being the 2 youngest World Series cleanup hitters at the age of 20. But also, the Nationals were able to take down starting pitcher Garrett Cole of the Astros, and they were able to beat the Astros, but especially Garrett Cole. So in the game that the Nationals won against starting pitcher Garrett Cole of the Astros, it was also Garrett Cole's first loss since May 22nd. So the Nationals were able to take down Garrett Cole in Game 1 of the World Series. They were able to take down Justin Verlander in Game 2 of the World Series. Now we're going to have to wait and see if they can take down Zach Greinke in Game 3 of the World Series, and if they can take down the rest of their starting pitchers in the World Series, and if they have to go through the starting rotation for the Astros again, if the World Series happens to go all the way to Game 7. But so far, they've been able to play some great baseball. whether it's their starting lineup, their relievers, or their starting pitchers. But they've been able to take down some of the best starting pitchers in Major League Baseball and for the Astros. It started with Gerrit Cole, then to Justin Verlander. Now we're going to have to wait and see if they can take down Zach Greinke. But so far for the Nationals, it's been looking great for them. And it doesn't matter what pitcher the Astros have had so far, they've been able to take them down. And it doesn't matter what starting pitcher opposing teams have thrown against the Nationals throughout the postseason and in the World Series. They've been able to take them down and beat them. Justin Verlander now has 200 postseason strikeouts, which is the most strikeouts in postseason history. For the Nationals, Ryan Zimmerman is their franchise player. Ryan Zimmerman was the first draft pick in Nationals history in the 2005 Major League Draft. He hit a walk-off home run in the first game at Nationals Park back in 2008. He hit the first postseason home run in Nationals history during Game 2 of the 2012 National League Division Series, and he hit the first World Series home run in Nationals history during Game 1 of the 2019 World Series. Now looking at the Nationals, they've been great so far throughout the postseason and now in the World Series. So we're going to have to wait and see if they can win the next few games in Washington, D.C., or if they can sweep the Astros. But now that the Nationals have won the first 2 games of the World Series, the other teams that have won the first 2 games of the World Series have landed up winning the World Series. But there has also been teams that have won the first 2 games of the World Series, and the team that's down 2-0 has come back to win the World Series. That's happened a few times in the past, and we're going to have to wait and see if the Astros can come back and win a few games or even win the World Series. But so far for the Nationals, it's been looking great with them having a 2-0 lead over the Astros. It's looking like they're going to win the World Series. We're going to have to wait and see what happens in the next few games. We're going to have to wait and see what happens in Washington, D.C. But if they win the World Series, they're definitely going to make history. It will be their first World Series title in franchise history. We're going to have to wait and see if the Nationals are World Series champions in the next week. So looking at the World Series, Game 1 and Game 2 were down in Houston. In Game 1, the Nationals won a close game, 5-4. In Game 2, the Nationals were able to blow out the Astros and they won the game, 12-3. Currently, the Nationals have a 2-0 lead over the Astros in the World Series. Game 3, Game 4, and Game 5 will be in Washington, D.C. And if this World Series goes back to Houston, Game 6 and Game 7 will be down in Houston. And we're going to have to wait and see what team wins this year's World Series. But so far it's been looking great for the Nationals. And they have a really great chance at winning this year's World Series. And if they do, they will definitely make history. They've been making history throughout the regular season and throughout the postseason. And they've definitely been making history in this year's World Series. And if they can win the World Series, that will definitely be the icing on the cake. There will be no doubt that the Nationals made history in 2019. But whatever team wins this year's World Series, they will definitely make history. Even the team that doesn't win the World Series this year, they have definitely made history in 2019. Right now, I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about the NFL. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to NFL football. In 172 career games, Aaron Rodgers became the fastest player in NFL history to throw 350 passing touchdowns in the fewest games played. Matthew Stafford became the fastest player in NFL history to throw 40,000 passing yards. In 24 career games, Patrick Mahomes became the fastest quarterback to throw 7,500 passing yards in NFL history. Since Patrick Mahomes became a full-time starter in 2018, he is tied for first with 17 career wins. He is first in passing yards. He is first in passing touchdowns, and he won NFL MVP in 2018. The Broncos traded Emmanuel Sanders and a 2020 fifth-round pick in exchange for a 2020 third and fourth-round pick. So looking at Emmanuel Sanders, he was the last remaining offensive player on the Broncos roster from Super Bowl 50. So now the Broncos do not have any offensive players from Super Bowl 50. In the 6 seasons that Emmanuel Sanders spent with the Broncos, he was definitely a huge part to the Broncos offense, especially when Peyton Manning was quarterback for the Broncos. Emmanuel Sanders was also a huge part of the Super Bowl 50 team and the Broncos team in 2015 that won Super Bowl 50. There's no doubt in the last few seasons, Emmanuel Sanders was one of the best wide receivers for the Broncos, and he was also the number 1 wide receiver for Peyton Manning and in the last few seasons for all the different quarterbacks the Broncos have had. But with the Broncos not playing their best football after winning Super Bowl 50 and having losing seasons in the last few years, Emmanuel Sanders didn't want to be a part of a losing team, and he wanted to change the scenery, and he requested that he wanted to be traded. So Emmanuel Sanders ended up getting traded to the 49ers. Currently the 49ers are undefeated. So Emmanuel Sanders is happy that he is a part of a winning team now, an undefeated team. And the 49ers have a chance at making the playoffs and possibly reaching the Super Bowl. So Emmanuel Sanders is happy that he is a part of the 49ers. But he's also thankful, and he gave credit to the Broncos since he was a member of the Broncos for the last 6 years, and he thanked the Broncos for being a part of this organization, and he was also grateful for winning Super Bowl 50 and being a part of the Broncos. So I want to say congrats to Emmanuel Sanders on having a great career with the Broncos, and good luck to you and the 49ers this season and going into the future. The Raiders traded cornerback Jaron Clowney to the Texans in exchange for a 2020 third-round pick. The Falcons traded wide receiver Mohamed Sanu to the Patriots in exchange for a second-round pick. Patriots wide receiver Josh Gordon is out for the rest of the season with a knee injury, and he was placed on injured reserve. The NFL trade deadline is on Tuesday, October 29. So in the next few days, we're going to have to wait and see if there's other trades that happen across the NFL. Any other NFL teams make any other trades in the next few days before the trade deadline on Tuesday, October 29. So looking at the NFL MVP candidates so far this season, this includes Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, Christian McCaffrey, Russell Wilson, and Deshaun Watson. All these individual players definitely have strong cases as to why they should be NFL MVP. And we're going to have to wait and see how these players play for the rest of the season. But so far, they've been playing some great football at their position. During the Broncos-Chiefs game, Patrick Mahomes had to come out during the game after suffering a dislocated right kneecap, and he didn't return back to the game. Patrick Mahomes is expected to miss the next few games. This week he returned back to practice on a limited basis. And every week they're going to evaluate Patrick Mahomes and see if he can play. We're just going to have to wait and see when Patrick Mahomes can play, whether it's this week, next week, or in the next few weeks. But with the Chiefs not having Patrick Mahomes at the quarterback position, this is definitely a huge loss for the Chiefs, and it can definitely impact the Chiefs, especially on offense, and it can definitely impact the Chiefs winning games in the next few weeks. And we're going to have to wait and see when Patrick Mahomes returns. And if he doesn't return this week, we're going to have to wait and see if the Chiefs can still win games without Patrick Mahomes. The Broncos lost to the Chiefs 6-30 on Thursday, October 17 in Denver. The Broncos-Chiefs game was a primetime game on Thursday Night Football. Now, looking at the Broncos on offense, they definitely didn't play great on offense since they only scored 6 points. And on defense, they didn't play great either since they allowed 30 points. The Chiefs are definitely one of the hardest teams to stop on offense, especially. And even with Patrick Mahomes having to come out of the game, before he came out of the game, he already done the damage. The Chiefs were winning at the time Patrick Mahomes had to come out of the game. With the Chiefs having Patrick Mahomes for part of the game, and even when the Chiefs didn't have Patrick Mahomes for the rest of the game, they already did the damage. It didn't matter if Patrick Mahomes was playing or not. The Chiefs still played some great football. The Chiefs were able to play great football on offense and defense. They were able to score 30 points on the Broncos. But the Chiefs especially played some great defense. They were able to sack Joe Flacco 9 times, and they forced 3 fumbles. But those stats, there's no way the Broncos were able to win this game. Especially with the Broncos only scoring 6 points, there was no way they were going to win this game. Especially with Joe Flacco getting sacked 9 times and turning the football over 3 times. Now going into the next game against the Colts, and for the rest of the season, the Broncos are going to have to play some better football on offense and defense, but especially on offense. Joe Flacco's going to have to play a lot better, but especially the offensive line. They really need to replace Garrett Bowles with somebody else, because everyone's just going around Garrett Bowles and sacking Joe Flacco. And that's probably one of the main reasons why Joe Flacco is not playing great at the quarterback position. Now, one of the things I don't like about Joe Flacco is he stays in the pocket. He will not come out of the pocket and try to run with the football or try to make a play outside of the pocket. So if the Broncos having that type of quarterback, Joe Flacco's not a bad quarterback. When he was a part of the Ravens, he was definitely a great quarterback, especially a few years ago and in the last few seasons. So if Joe Flacco's not going to come out of the pocket, the Broncos need to have a great offensive line that can protect Joe Flacco. And if they have a great offensive line, I guarantee you Joe Flacco will be a better quarterback. But it's going to start off with the Broncos replacing Garrett Bowles. Everyone's just going around Garrett Bowles and sacking Joe Flacco. So they definitely need to replace Garrett Bowles on the end. And if they do that, there should definitely be a difference with the offensive line, and they should definitely play better. And Joe Flacco will have better protection, and he'll be able to make some big plays going down the field. The Broncos' next game is against the Colts on Sunday, October 27. Now, looking at the Broncos on offense and defense, to start off with defense, they're going to have to play some great defense against the Colts if they want to win this game. The Colts have definitely played great on offense and defense, but especially on offense. And with the Colts being without Andrew Luck now since he retired, don't count out quarterback Jacoby Brissett. He's a great quarterback, especially in the last game and in some of the last few games this season. He's proven why he is a great quarterback. He's had a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns. He's made some big plays down the field. So if the Broncos want to win this game, they're going to have to stop the Colts on offense, but especially quarterback Jacoby Brissett. Now, if the Broncos want to win this game, they're going to have to play great on offense. They're going to have to play great on defense, but especially on offense. Joe Flacco in the offense is going to have to play better. Now, with the Broncos not having Emmanuel Sanders, it's going to look different for the Broncos at the wide receiver position. Now, it's time for Courtland Sutton to step up. And it's time for him to shine. This is his moment, and he has to prove why he's going to be our number one wide receiver since we don't have Emmanuel Sanders anymore. But also, Deshaun Hamilton and Tim Patrick, they're also going to have to step up. And it's their time to show what they're capable of. So looking at the Broncos on offense, they're going to have to score some points, especially touchdowns in the red zone. Joe Flacco's going to have to play better. But at that wide receiver position, Courtland Sutton's going to have to show why he's our number one wide receiver now. But Courtland Sutton, Deshaun Hamilton, and Tim Patrick, it's time for them to step up and take advantage of this moment and show what they're capable of. So that's the keys to the Broncos beating the Colts this Sunday. This is the 8th week of regular season football. So right now I'm going to update you with the Week 7 final scores and the Week 8 schedule in the NFL. And I'm also going to tell you the games to keep an eye on this week in NFL football. So looking at Week 7, here are the final scores and highlights from this week of NFL football. The Chiefs beat the Broncos 30-6 on Thursday Night Football. The Vikings beat the Lions 42-30. The Packers beat the Raiders 42-24. The Colts beat the Texans 30-23. The 49ers beat the Redskins 9-0. The Titans beat the Chargers 23-20. The Saints beat the Bears 36-25. The Ravens beat the Seahawks 30-16. The Cowboys beat the Eagles 37-10 on Sunday Night Football. And the Patriots beat the Jets 33-0 on Monday Night Football. Now looking at the Week 8 matchups, here are the matchups to keep an eye on this week in NFL football. The Redskins versus the Vikings on Thursday Night Football. The Broncos versus the Colts. The Eagles versus the Bills. The Chargers versus the Bears. The Panthers versus the 49ers. The Raiders versus the Texans. The Browns versus the Patriots. The Packers versus the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. And the Dolphins versus the Steelers on Monday Night Football. So that's the Week 7 final scores and the Week 8 schedule for the NFL. The undefeated team so far this season includes the Patriots and 49ers. Now we're going to have to wait and see how many more games this season both the Patriots and the 49ers can remain undefeated, or when the Patriots and the 49ers will lose their first game this season. Panthers quarterback Kyle Allen is the last quarterback in the NFL to not throw an interception this season. In the Week 8 NFL Power Rankings, the current top 10 NFL football teams are the Patriots, Saints, 49ers, Packers, Chiefs, Ravens, Seahawks, Vikings, Bills, and Texans. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about the NBA and NHL. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to NBA basketball. Pascal Siakam and the Raptors have agreed to a 4-year max contract extension. Jaylen Brown and the Celtics have agreed to a 4-year contract extension. Buddy Hield and the Kings have agreed to a 4-year contract extension. Javonte Murray and the Spurs have agreed to a 4-year contract extension. The NBA announced Salt Lake City will host the 2023 NBA All-Star Game. Warriors head coach Steve Kerr announced Klay Thompson is likely not going to play this season as he is still recovering from a torn ACL in his left leg that occurred during Game 6 of the 2019 NBA Finals. Now we're going to have to wait and see, but there is a possibility Klay Thompson could return back to the court in March or in early April. That will be the soonest Klay Thompson could possibly return if he is ready to play this season. But if not, it's very likely Klay Thompson will sit out this season for the Warriors as he is recovering from this ACL tear. Usually an ACL tear is a 9-month recovery, and sometimes it can take up to a year to fully recover. So we're going to have to wait and see if Klay Thompson can recover by March or early April, the latest. But if Klay Thompson plays this season, it will be his decision, and it will come down to his decision. And the latest that will happen is in March or in early April. Zion Williamson suffered a severe injury to his right knee during a preseason game. He had knee surgery to repair torn meniscus in his right knee, and he's expected to miss 6 to 8 weeks. Now looking at Zion Williamson, he definitely had a great preseason. And the way he was playing throughout the preseason, he definitely showed his potential in the NBA during the regular season, this season, and going into the future. Zion Williamson definitely has a lot of potential for the Pelicans and in the NBA this season and going into the future. So I can't wait to see Zion Williamson return back to the court for the Pelicans. This is definitely a huge loss to the Pelicans, since Zion Williamson will be out for the next 6 to 8 weeks now that the regular season has begun. So far, the Pelicans have looked great without Zion Williamson, and they will definitely play better basketball with Zion Williamson once he returns back to the court for the Pelicans. The beginning of the NBA regular season began on October 22nd. It's a great time of year now that we're in October. The NBA regular season has finally begun. NBA basketball is finally back. This season for the NBA is definitely going to be exciting for all the teams in the Eastern Conference, but especially the teams in the Western Conference. All the teams in the Western Conference are definitely going to be exciting to watch. It's going to be interesting to see what teams make it into the playoffs this season in the Eastern Conference and in the Western Conference. But especially in the Western Conference, it's going to be interesting to see how certain teams play in the Eastern Conference, but especially in the Western Conference. I can't wait to see what teams make it into the playoffs in the Eastern and Western Conference, and what two teams make it to the NBA Finals, and what team wins the NBA Finals. But the two teams that make it to the NBA Finals this season and the team that wins the NBA Finals this season, they're going to be different teams compared to other teams that made it to the NBA Finals in the last few years. Also, it's going to be interesting to see what two teams make it to the NBA Finals and what team wins the NBA Finals this season. Now, the teams that make it to the NBA Finals this season, they're going to be different from the teams that made it to the NBA Finals in the last few seasons. And even the team that wins the NBA Finals this season is going to be a different team that has won the NBA Finals in the last few seasons. And it's going to be exciting to see what teams in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference play some great basketball, especially with the superstars that were free agents this past summer and the superstars that signed with new teams. It's going to be interesting to see how those teams play this season. Now, looking at the favorite teams to make it to the NBA Finals and the favorite teams to win the NBA Finals this season, we're definitely going to have different teams compared to other teams that have been favored in the last few seasons. So NBA basketball is finally back. NBA basketball has finally begun. The NBA regular season has finally begun. And it's just a great time of year right now. And Nuggets basketball is finally back. And the NBA is finally back. In Kyrie Irving's Nets debut, he had 50 points, which was the most points scored in a Nets debut and for a new individual player's debut with a new team. So right now I'm going to update you with the current Nuggets schedule, and I'm going to tell you the teams they go against to open up the regular season. Nuggets basketball is finally back. So to open up the regular season, the Nuggets went against the Trailblazers up in Portland. And the Nuggets were able to beat the Trailblazers 108-100. The Nuggets open up the regular season, and their home opener is against the Suns here at the Pepsi Center. And the next week, the Nuggets go against the Kings and the Mavericks. So it's great that Nuggets basketball is finally back. There's no better team they could have opened up the regular season against than the Trailblazers, since the Nuggets season ended against the Trailblazers last season, and now they have opened up the regular season against the Trailblazers. So they started the regular season against the Trailblazers. Their home opener is against the Suns. So if there's one thing I can recommend, I highly recommend that you go out to the Pepsi Center, go to the Nuggets home opener against the Suns. If you can't make it to that game, definitely check out the next few home games that the Nuggets have here at the Pepsi Center. The Nuggets had a great season last season. They were one of the best teams in the Western Conference and in the NBA. They made it all the way to the second round of the Western Conference playoffs, but they got eliminated to the Trailblazers. This season, the Nuggets are expected to be one of the best teams in the Western Conference again and in the NBA, and they're expected to even go further in the playoffs if they happen to make it into the playoffs. So it's exciting for Nuggets basketball now and going into the future. They have a young, talented roster. It's the beginning of the regular season. This is only the beginning. We're going to have to wait and see how this young, talented Nuggets team plays. This is only the beginning, and they have a lot of potential this season and going into the future. But I would expect a lot of great things from the Nuggets this season. The Nuggets are expected to be a great basketball team in the Western Conference and in the NBA. So that's the current Nuggets schedule to open up the regular season. It's the beginning of the NBA regular season. The regular season began this week. This is only the beginning, and it's a long NBA season. We're going to have to wait and see what teams make it into the playoffs in the Eastern and Western Conference, what two teams make it to the NBA Finals, and what team wins the NBA Finals. But this is only the beginning. Moving on now to NHL hockey. Right now I'm going to update you with the current schedule for the Avalanche. In the last week, the Avalanche were able to beat the Panthers 5-4 in overtime. The Avalanche were able to beat the Lightning 6-2. And the Avalanche lost to the Blues 3-1. This week, the Avalanche go against the Golden Knights, the Ducks, and the Panthers. So that's the current schedule for the Avalanche for this week. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about college football. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to college football. Illinois beat number 6 Wisconsin 24-23, and this was one of the biggest upsets in college football this season. So far this season in college football, we have seen a few upsets by teams that are not ranked in the top 25 of college football. They have been able to upset teams that are ranked in the top 25 of college football. But this was one of the biggest upsets in college football this season between Illinois and number 6 Wisconsin. Colorado lost to Washington State 10-41 on Saturday, October 19th. Colorado goes against USC on Friday, October 25th up in Boulder, Colorado. Colorado State goes against Fresno State on Saturday, October 26th. This is the 9th week of college football. So right now I'm going to update you with the Week 8 college football final scores. And I'm also going to tell you the Week 9 college football schedule and the games to keep an eye on this week in college football. So looking at the Week 8 final scores, here are the Week 8 final scores and highlights from this week of college football. Number 12 Utah beat number 24 Arizona State 21-3. Number 6 Penn State beat number 19 Michigan 28-21. Illinois beat number 6 Wisconsin 24-23. And that was one of the biggest upsets in college football this season. Now looking at the Week 9 matchups, here are the matchups to keep an eye on this week in college football. Number 13 Wisconsin versus number 3 Ohio State. Number 9 Auburn versus number 2 LSU. And number 8 Notre Dame versus number 19 Michigan. So that's the Week 8 final scores and the Week 9 schedule for college football. In the Week 9 college football AP Top 10 poll, the current top 10 college football teams are Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma, Penn State, Florida, Notre Dame, Auburn, and Georgia. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about the end of the show. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to the show. What to watch for this week in sports. The Broncos' next game is against the Colts on Sunday, October 27. day week of NFL regular season football. Colorado goes against USC on Friday, October 25th up in Boulder, Colorado. Colorado State goes against Fresno State on Saturday, October 26th. CU Buffaloes, CSU Rams, the 9th week of college football. The World Series is between the Astros and the Nationals. The World Series, Major League Baseball, postseason baseball, Major League Baseball, the Nuggets, NBA regular season basketball, NBA basketball, the Avalanche, NHL hockey. Moving on now, on the next show, I will talk about NFL football, Major League Baseball, NBA basketball, NHL hockey, and college football. I hope you all have a great weekend. Tune in to the next All Sports with Gerardo show next Thursday from 3:30 to 5 p.m. I want to say thank you to everybody that listens to All Sports through Met Radio here on mymetmedia.com. Subscribe or like my pages on social media at All Sports with Gerardo. Until next time, this is Gerardo.